Touch Dalai, welcome to Tibet This Week, a weekly news edition on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's have a look at today's headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama graces Silver Jubilee celebration of Bharat Tibbat Sahyog Manch. His Holiness the Dalai Lama congratulates King Charles III on his coronation. Sikyong concludes official visit to Europe and leaves for Tibetan settlements in Himachal Pradesh. Sikyong asserts hope for genuine autonomy inside Tibet during exclusive interview with BBC Hard Talk. Secretary Antony Blinken braces concern over Tibetan mass DNA collection. Situation of Tibetan women in Tibet raised at United Nations meeting ahead of China review. Tibet festival held at Tsukiji Hongwanji Temple in Tokyo. Office of Tibet Taiwan participates in Europe Day celebrations in Taipei. The 25th founding anniversary of the Bharat Tibbat Sahyog Manch was commemorated on Friday last week in the presence of His Holiness the Dalai Lama as the event's chief guest at Tekchen Choling Tsukulakang in Dharamshala. Khenpo Sonam Tempel, Speaker of Tibetan Parliament in Exile, officiating Sikyong Kalun Thalam Toma Changra of Department of Education, Central Tibetan Administration, Shri Krishan Kapoor, Lok Sabha Member of the Parliament from Kangra, Shri Jugal Kishore Sharma, Lok Sabha Member of Parliament from Jammu, Shri Gajendra Chauhan, Actor and Vice Chancellor of Pandit Lakshmi Chand State University of Performing and Visual Arts, graced the occasion as a guest of honors. Addressing the gathering, His Holiness the Dalai Lama reminded the Tibetan community about the gratitude owed to the government and people of India for accommodating sustenance of Tibetans in exile, including aiding in perseverance of Tibet's cultural heritages, as well as imparting the modern education to Tibetans. His Holiness also conveyed his gratitude to the Bharat Tibbat Sahyog Manch for their continued support of the Tibetan cause. After the addresses from Shri Indresh Kumar, late dignitaries of the Bharat Tibbat Sahyog Manch, the guest of honor officiating Sikyong Kalun Changra Thalam Doma of the Central Tibetan Administration spoke at the event. The other guest of honor at the event, Speaker of the 17th Tibetan Parliament in Exile, Khenpo Sonam Tempel, also expressed his gratitude to the government and people of India and to Tibet support groups in India for raising awareness amongst the Indian populace on Tibet. On the auspicious occasion of King Charles III Coronation Day, His Holiness the Dalai Lama wrote a warm congratulatory letter to the new king on Saturday last week. In the letter, His Holiness recalled his good friendship with the king and wished the king every success in meeting the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead in fulfilling the hopes and aspirations of the British people and contributing to the creation of a more peaceful world, free of violent conflict, with kindness and affection, dedicated to the service of others. Sikyong Pemba, sitting on his final day of official engagements in Denmark, had a meeting with Tobias Bonake, chairman of the Nordic think tank for Tech and Democracy, at the Democratic Garage set up by the Denmark Ministry of Culture to address the big tech influence on democratic debates in the Nordic countries. After the meeting with Nordic think tank for Tech and Democracy, Sikyong Pemba Sering met with Danish parliamentarian Karsten Hong, a member of the Parliament's Foreign Affairs and Foreign Policy Committee, the third vice president of the Parliamentary Presidium and the Foreign Affairs spokespersons for the Danish Socialist People's Party at the Danish Parliament. In the afternoon, Sikyong visited the Danish Institute for Human Rights, where he met with the Institute's Executive Director Louis Holck and International Director Mette Tagensen in Copenhagen. During the hour-long meeting, Sikyong Pemba Sering and the delegates apprised the directors of the dire situation inside Tibet, including over 1 million Tibetan children between the ages of 4 to 18 coerced into state-run colonial boarding schools and preschools. Following his interaction at the Danish Institute for Human Rights, Sikyong met with the Danish Liberal Party parliamentarian Kim Valentin, a member of the Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee at the Danish Parliament. Sikyong Pemba Sering's first official visit to Denmark concluded with a meeting with the board members of the Danish China Critical Society, and representatives from across Danish youth political parties joined the meeting. Danish-China Critical Society is an organization aimed at combating the negative influence of the People's Republic of China in Denmark and disseminating knowledge and criticism regarding the People's Republic of China's violations of fundamental human rights, freedom of expression and democracy in Copenhagen. Sikyong was accompanied by Representative Sonam Tsering Farsi, Secretary Loche Samden, Office of Tibet, London, Anders Omark Andersen, President, and Han Bess Bolsberg, Vice President of Tibet Support Committee, Denmark. After the successful conclusion of bilateral engagements in Denmark, Sikyong Tsering flew to Munich, Germany on Friday last week on the last leg of his official Europe tour. His arrival at Munich was welcomed by Representative Tsukiji, accompanied by Tenzin Chösang of Tibet Bureau, President of the Association of Tibetans in Germany, President of the Tibetan community in Munich, and members of the Munich Tibetan community. Sikyong met with the executive members of the Tibetan community in Munich, where he addressed the Tibetan community in and around Munich in the evening. On the next day, Sikyong left for Frankfurt, where Sikyong was received by President Wangmu Karso, Vice President Tsering Thuntup of Frankfurt Tibetan community, and greeted by members of the community. Sikyong returned to Delhi on Monday this week after completing his 2 weeks official visit to the United Kingdom, Norway, Denmark and Germany. Currently, Sikyong is visiting areas in and around Shimla, Kulu Manali, Mandi and Tashijong from 9 to 17 May. Starting from Tuesday this week, Sikyong Tsering paid assessment visits to the Tibetan cluster communities, Tibetan monasteries, Chief Representative Office, offices of local bodies situated in Shimla. On Thursday this week, Sikyong Tsering met with the Chief Minister of Himachal Pradesh, and he is set to meet the Governor and Principal Secretary, where he will raise the welfare issue faced by the Tibetans in Shimla. During his recent tour of the United Kingdom, Sikyong Tsering spoke to Sarah Montek on the BBC Hard Talk program on the range of issues concerning Tibet in a 23-minute-long audio clip released on Friday last week. On being asked what he wants for Tibet, Sikyong Tsering answered that he seeks genuine autonomy not only in the name but also in the essence, based on the reality of the situation, and to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict in a non-violent and peaceful means through negotiation that should be mutually beneficial and lasting.
Considering the reality of the situation and the common interests of people, now we are asking for autonomy rather than independence, a genuine autonomy, not only in name, but also in essence. That is what we are looking for, to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict in a non-violent, peaceful means through negotiation that should be mutually beneficial and lasting.
On Wednesday this week, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken expressed concern over the reports of a mass DNA collection drive in Tibet that has taken over DNA samples from as many as 1.2 million Tibetans, including children as young as 5. This public concern was raised by Secretary Blinken at Freedom House Annual Freedom Awards and has made him the senior-most U.S. official to highlight the concern.
Access to human genomic data opens up a whole other set of human rights concerns. Advances in biotechnology have enabled genomic surveillance based on a person's DNA, potentially facilitating abuses, and we've seen some of those, for example, committed by the People's Republic of China against Uyghurs and other minorities in Xinjiang. We're also concerned by reports of the spread of mass DNA collection to Tibet as an additional form of control and surveillance over the Tibetan population.
As per the investigation of Human Rights Watch, DNA information is highly sensitive and can facilitate a wide array of abuses if collected or shared non-consensually. Any compelled collection or use by the government is a serious intrusion on the right to privacy. In an effort to socially control the Tibetans, the Chinese authority has incessantly resorted to surveillance and over-policing, including arbitrary collection of DNA samples from Tibetans. The Tibet Bureau and the Tibetan Women's Association delivered a joint statement on the situation of Tibetan women in Tibet during a UN public briefing for the 85th session of the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination held on Monday this week. Representative Tsukiji, along with the UN Advocacy Officer Kaldin Somo and the President of Tibetan Women's Association Tenzing Doma, participated in the meeting and met with the UN committee's members and apprised them of the situation of Tibetan women in Tibet under China's control. During the window of 2-minute oral briefing opportunity on behalf of the Tibet Bureau and Tibetan Women Association, UN Advocacy Officer of the Tibet Bureau, Kaldin Somo, highlighted China's discriminated policies and patterns impacting the Tibetan women in Tibet disproportionately.
Over 1 million of Tibetan children aged 6 to 18 are forcibly removed from their parents and sent to residential schools aimed to assimilate Tibetan children into Han majority culture. The harassment and sexual abuses in these residential schools in Tibet are alarming. Tibetan rights defenders are silenced and suppressed systematically.
In view of the review session of the treaty body, the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the Tibet Bureau and Tibetan Women's Association have made a detailed written submission on the situation of Tibetan women in Tibet under China's rule. The 23-member expert committee will review the status of implementation of the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women by China on Friday, 12 May 2023. Tibet House Japan organized a 2-day Tibet festival from 3rd to 4th May at Tsukiji Hongwanji Temple in Tokyo. The festival coincides with the Japanese Golden Week holiday, enabling many Japanese friends, supporters and tourists to enjoy and experience Tibetan culture, history and spiritualism. Representative Dr. Tsawangyebu Arya of the Liaison Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for Japan and East Asia recalled the ancient ties of Tibet and Japan and said the festival have come alive and restored those ties. The festival featured a series of talks on Tibetan history, Buddhism, meditation and spiritual experience. Professor Ishihama Yumiko of Waseda University delivered an opening talk with a PowerPoint presentation on the historical relationship between the Hongwanji Temple and Tibet. She elaborated on Ogi Bunkyo and Tada Togan's visit to Tibet. The festival provided a good opportunity for the Japanese and Tibetans to share and enjoy the culture of Tibet, Tibetan cuisine, traditional music and dance. It also gave the visitors information and ideas about the struggle and challenges of the Tibetan community. The Tibetan community in Japan and the Safe Tibet Network worked closely with the Tibet House and supported the festival. Kitazawa Andri of the Safe Tibet Network moderated the 2-day events. The European Economic Trade Office in Taipei commemorated the 20th anniversary of the founding of EATO and Europe Day on Saturday last week in Taipei. The 2-day celebrations were attended by representatives of 16 European countries and officials from Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Representative Ketsa Gezebawa, accompanied by the Secretary of the Office, also attended the event at the invitation of Fili Gergozowski, President of EATO. That is all the news for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. Thank you for watching Tibet TV.